I'm smiling and keep not you. But I will do it the same. Avoid awkwardness. Just to avoid it, I will do the same.
Can someone close the door? Roger, go close the door.
Poor boy.
Or do you need that we because we love.
So it's L that doesn't separate it. Both L.
Yes.
Your friends.
Thank you.
Hello everybody, welcome to the second round of TADO 2018. I'm the chair, I'm John, my preferred gender pronoun is he or they. Two of my trainees are Aida, he. We'll go around the house one practice.
I said mine, Jerry.
Every Prime Minister, Fred, no preference. Kyrie, no preference.
From closing out profit, no preference.
They, them. Thank you.
Daniel, no preference. Without further ado, under the motion, this House believes that modern feminist movements in Indonesia should aggressively campaign for the abandonment of the traditional celebration of Kartini days and push towards rebranding. I invite the Prime Minister to kiss on.
Speak here.
The annual celebration of Kartini Day so far has done nothing but bastardize the values of Kartini. They entrench societal norms that there is a standard that women must adhere to, one that is traditional, one that you must be feminine, or otherwise you are not like Kartini and you will never be like her. What is the goal under side government? Two things. We want diverse message for feminist movement. Secondly, we want inclusivity and ensuring that more individuals are able to feel relate to the feminist movement, and it necessitates the feminist movement to campaign for this rebranding. So first, what will this rebranding look like? One, we will be based on Kartini's visions. Firstly, when she fought for the women's rights, its values such as empowering choice of women, things like the things that she fought for, like accessibility of education, it's equal accessibility of rights between men and women. But secondly, this campaign will look like similarly to like the Women's March, for example. That means the message must be modern, therefore it must not be bounded by femininity, that it must send a message that you can be anything you want. You can be a CEO, you can be a politician, you can be women in positions of power. Clarification?
Would you abandon Kartini as a feminist figure in Indonesia?
Of course not, but we will of course, we will still make Kartini the face of the movement, but rather we propagate the visions that she firstly had, which is choice and empowering the choice of women and accessibility. If they want to tell us that we will abandon Kartini's movement, they have to tell us why exactly this is not aligned with her principle, given that she firstly fought to empower women. So, what's unique about this festival? We must understand that this festival is important in the sense that it's a national celebration and it's celebrated annually. That means there's a huge amount of media airtime and publicity. But secondly, there's huge amount of public support for this movement. But lastly, there's huge amount of political support as well, because politicians have an incentive to participate themselves in the movement. Therefore, the feminist movement must make a strategic call as to how exactly they want to empower women in Indonesia. No, thank you. Why must the celebration must be rebranded, and why is it that status quo is terrible? So firstly, the fact that in status quo, the celebration surrounds traditional and conventional norms. It's things like singing competitions. It's things like cooking competitions. It's things like beauty pageants. These are norms that are structured by patriarchal that tells women you have to be in the kitchen. That tells women you have to be pretty in order for you to be valuable. It's things like that women can only be valuable if they have femininity. It emboldens the narrative that women's talent, no thank you, are locked by their femininity, and we think that's harmful. Why is it so? Because you use a women's liberator to mask your patriarchal values. The fact that it's not aligned with Kartini, the fact that she fought for norms that women must be smart because they must access education, they must be given a choice to choose how exactly they want to live their life. The problem is you delegitimize all of her first concern when she fought for women's rights. People presume that she fought for all of the traditional feminine characteristics when she only wanted to empower women and give women choice. This bastardized her vision, and you give the idea in Indonesia that female liberation must be confided in femininity, and we think that's harmful. Secondly, while you lock people out of the movement, opening, you have anything?
How strong do you think the feminist movement is in Indonesia?
I think it's pretty strong, given that Indonesia is getting more and more educated. Therefore, a lot of individuals in Indonesia are getting more liberal because of access to education, because of access to information. We think it's pretty strong. Secondly, we think this locks people out of the movement because people who aren't conventionally feminine aren't able to access the movement because they feel alienated by the movement. The fact that the feminist movement celebrates this idea that your liberation and your value is confided in femininity, women who don't have those feminine traits aren't able to relate to your movement at all. What does this mean? This means that feminist movement becomes exclusive. That means there's less people opting into movement because they don't feel relatability. Secondly, it means less number for you too. That makes it harder for the feminist movement because it becomes much, much smaller because of its exclusivity. We think that's harmful in the sense that you need numbers in order for you to gain political traction, in order for you to lobby to politicians, in order for you to get a huge amount of capital. No, thank you. What's the converse then on the outside of the house? The celebration will surround things like protests for equal wage, for example, protests for things like reproduction rights, for example. Those are easier things to find commonality under because all women can relate to it, as opposed to feminine traits that only a group of women can exclusively. No, thank you. Opposition might say, oh, but you will make feminine traits irreconcilable with the feminist movement, and that's a harm because you're also exclusive. We tell you that traditional feminine characteristics are celebrated in Indonesia anyway. Therefore, what needs to happen now is the feminist movement must create a counter-narrative to at least neutralize the context and allow the idea that both femininity and non-traditional feminine traits can exist equally in women. That allows exclusivity. But opposition might also say, like, you lose majority support, the feminist movement might seem radical. We don't think this is true, right? Because we argue to you that Indonesia is getting more liberal because of the education. But secondly, given that traditional harm already exists, the strategic call is what must we prioritize then? We argue to you the fact that this celebration has a lot of political support, a lot of media airtime. Therefore, it must reflect on what women need in modern times right now. The things that we need are more modern, it's things like equal wage. Therefore, policies will then be better for women because it reflects what women need at this point in time. It won't be what you traditionally needed in the last 100 years, but it's what you need right now in modern times. We think we fight for women's rights better because we're more inclusive, because we fight for more relevant things for individuals, because we allow more women to feel relatable to us.
And in Prime Minister, I invite the leader of opposition.
Raja,
Muted.
you see the mic icon?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I have not heard an argument from a leader of opposition to suggest why Indonesia must stay looking at women as feminine, that they are unable to move past that because we have celebration that is entrenched not only in patriarchy, but with the expectation that the way we celebrate women, the way we celebrate value, must be confined towards femininity. I think it fundamentally harms the ability for the feminist movement to fight for all other things, considering the fact it is unlikely for them to successfully challenge the narrative. And therefore, we think the strategy then must become that we use this celebration as a counter narrative. No matter how successful our campaign will be, we'll tell you why it is likely going to be good for the movement. I have two rebuttals to make before moving on to one argument to suggest why we can incentivize political structures to accept feminism more in Indonesia. The first rebuttal I'll make is this concern from leader of opposition about free choice. The fact that the campaign is antithetical towards feminism because we set an expectation, thank you for closing opposition, how women should behave, on the fact that we are subliminally rejecting femininity to be a core value that women can hold in Indonesia. My problem with this argument is one, they did not provide a counterfactual to suggest how things are likely going to change in their world because we provided you an argument to suggest that it's entrenched because the celebration only celebrates how Indonesian men celebrates women based on how valuable and how feminine they are. So I don't understand how likely free choice is empowered in their world. But secondly, recognize that they did not provide an argument to suggest why is it important to celebrate feminine values in Indonesia, considering the fact that those narratives are already enshrined in how Indonesian men feel about women at the end of the day. We told you that one, it expects women to be only meaningful and their life become more meaningful if we are able to do all these things like cooking, sewing, being more beautiful than other women. We think it's less likely for you to be able to subscribe to the original vision of Kartini because Kartini at least fought for free choice of women through very important institutions like politics, like education. You are likely going to submerge that message to one that only celebrates femininity. But they say, oh, why can't we do both? Recognize that this celebration is likely going to entrench power structures that can use this celebration to say, oh, most Indonesian women do want femininity because they are celebrating, do want femininity because they are celebrating femininity. So it's less likely for the feminist movement to be able to benefit directly from Kartini because Indonesian men, Indonesian male politicians are used to the idea that Kartini meant femininity and non-feminine traits are antithetical to Kartini and Kartini's vision at the end of the day. So that is the direct harm that is likely going to limit choices of women at their world at the end of the day. But secondly, let's talk about backlash, right? Because their argument seems to suggest that men are likely going to reject this policy because of their perception towards women being something that's feminine. Recognize that one, I don't understand the scale then, because if men in their world already look at women through a feminine lens, I don't see why the challenge could be more harmful towards women, because recognize that there are already prescribed structures that indirectly affect women becomes, for example, things that they are likely going to be discriminated at work if they possess non-feminine traits. They are likely going to be locked out of positions of power because being in positions of power is not feminine. All of those things already exist in their world anyway. They need to explain an exclusive harm to suggest why this campaign is likely going to harm the movement. But before that, closing, any questions?
Yeah, so in the world of opening government, like what is the rebranding like? Is your Hari Kartini gonna have more Western progressive feminist ideals, or like can you please just elaborate?
Okay, we have already established that Kartini must be one that fought for the original vision of empowerment for women through important institutions like education and politics. But we also rebrand that celebration to be one that celebrates choice, that one that distances itself away from traditional feminine values like the ability of you to cook, the ability for you to be pretty. All that celebration, all that festival seems to suggest that Kartini must be looked upon on a feminine lens. You have to defend that in your work. So now let's talk about the narrative of why the active campaign is likely going to change political structures in our world. A few things to illustrate. The first is that recognize that the active challenge by the feminist movement is likely to create discourse within movement in Indonesia. No, thank you. Recognize that considering the fact that women are already seen in the lens of femininity, women who are out of that are alienated. They have an incentive to challenge that because they are directly benefiting, they are likely going to directly benefit from being able to convince other women that non-traditional traits of femininity are equally important as well. So we think that the ability for women to collectivize happens better in our world because the feminist movement is directly able to say that no, femininity doesn't have to be what Indonesian women should be, that other traits are equally important as well. And other traits should be celebrated as well in this important day celebrating our hero. We think that it's very likely for other forms of messaging that a feminist movement can achieve. For example, the ability for women to be powerful, the ability for women to do sports, the ability for women to not be confined by their beauty is likely going to be happening better in our world. But if they say it's not going to be successful, why we think that you should try even if you're not successful? Two things. The first is that you create the political pressure necessary and you create the political visibility necessary for other traits of feminism to exist in Indonesia. Recognize that you do not create those things in your world because the politically convenient choice for women is to prescribe to femininity. It is very unlikely for your female politicians in their world to challenge conventions because the only way they are seen as politically successful is they are able, if they were to subscribe to whatever men think they should be. We think that the ability for women to attract votes, to be able to attract inclusivity of not only women in Indonesia, but other men who disagrees with these structures are likely going to be better in our world because they are able to find commonality other than feminine traits that they are going to defend. But secondly, we think that even if it's not successful, the ability for the feminist movement to directly get benefits from international scrutiny, the ability for them to get funding from international institutions, the ability for them to get visibility globally as a result of the fight to diversify how feminism is looked upon in Indonesia is likely going to be good for Indonesian women and the movement as well. They're able to collectivize and coordinate with other movements out there. They're able to collectivize resources to strategically lobby for politicians for more female-friendly policies. Those things happen better in our work because we create the spark that is absolutely necessary for women to move away from femininity, and that's why I'm so proud to propose.
First, we'd like to start with some clarifications that we on closing government, we want liberal and Western feminism in our best case scenario for this debate. However, even if these liberal ideas fail on the Gov side, at least we have other alternatives that will bring about change and some progress in Indonesian society, as I'll explain in my arguments. So before I start with any arguments, I would like to give a few rebuttals. So first, we'd like to clarify that while the opening op may push for choice for women, for who they can marry, and the values that Kartini pushed, and thus resulted in Kartini Day, we believe that we can push for this as well, and also push for Western and liberal feminism, and so we mitigate, we get those benefits as well. And secondly, the opening op has also mentioned that Indonesian society is getting more and more traditional, and so we say, well, if this is true, this means that the situation is even more dire, and we need to start the wheels of change now before it becomes too late, and the women in Indonesia we're unable to help them even more. So on to my arguments. Today, I will bring about two ideas. Firstly, the idea of local grassroots movements and how they will benefit the, Indonesian society. And secondly, what is the importance of first world feminism. So firstly, within conservative families, you must understand that the women in Indonesia are indoctrinated to be a good wife who can cook, who can clean, who can produce children, who can take care of them. And we believe that they are the individuals that need the help of liberal feminist ideas, such as opening has already mentioned, like achieving better careers and so on and so on. And we believe that in this society right now, women are being suffocated and oppressed within this Indonesian society and have internalized this sexism and have seen it as the norm. And we believe that this is extremely unacceptable. And so we believe that first world feminism is what we would like to push on the closing government most of all, because of the benefits that it will get the women in Indonesia, such as it will help their self-esteem, help them lobby for more women-friendly policies, as opening has mentioned, etc., etc. However, we believe that even if this liberal ideas won't fly in Indonesia, we believe that we have an alternative that definitely will still bring maybe not as much, will still bring progress and change over the years. And so I'd like to move on to local grassroots movements.
Clarification.
Yes, sure.
So Joko Widodo, the assumed progressive of Indonesia, just appointed an Islamist as his deputy in the election. Given that conservatism is rising, how does your liberal value succeed?
That is what I'm moving on to now. Thank you for that. So firstly, I like to, so for local grassroots movements, we believe that Kartini Day can be seen as an excuse because of this festival. The government of Indonesia will think that, well, with this means that the issue of feminism in our nation is now resolved, and thus we don't need to change anything in politics. We don't have to change our stance. We don't have to change any beliefs that we already previously had. Because enough progress is already happening. We believe that Kartini Day it feeds the narrative of sexism, as opening has already mentioned. It's seen through a feminist, feminine lens. But we also believe that Kartini Day is not just a festival and not just a random holiday where people do whatever they want. We believe that it's a symbol for women in Indonesia. However, this symbol is not enough for the women as of
as a status quo. So, and then I'd like to move on about how local grassroots movements provides icons to women in Indonesia. And we believe that this is extremely important because when you only have one icon that is Kartini to look upon, and she propagates things like being pretty, being able to cook well, and all these naturally feminine aspects of women. When you have this kind of feminist icon, well, her values are great, but we believe that these women in Indonesia also need positive icons that support and introduce more liberal ideas, giving the women in Indonesia another icon to look up to and another choice so that their internal beliefs may be challenged or they may even be strengthened. This is so important because then it creates change within the minds of women in Indonesia, and it creates change and it makes them more incentivized to think about their life right now and what could be done to change it. So to address what the opposition has said about how these liberal ideas won't fly, we say that, well, in Indonesia, we are very sure that feminist movements there are very, very aware of all the conservatism in the nation itself. And while this is not ideal, we believe that Indonesian feminists are the better alternative to liberal feminism because the majority of women in Indonesia we will choose Indonesian feminists because the majority of women in Indonesia will empathize and support these local movements more than liberal movements will. And so these feminist movements can choose a slightly less radical or a milder version of Western feminism so that the majority will be more incentivized to support them, more incentivized to believe in their values and to it turns the cause in their mind. And so even if tradition is still intact, we believe that this will make the women in Indonesia more comfortable with feminist values and it makes them more willing to support such values. So even if the change is not immediate or not as gigantic as we hoped it would, we believe that this will still start the wheels of change, and so society in Indonesia will continue to progress and progress. And they also mentioned that we don't have enough traction. Well, we believe that's what we're pushing for. We're pushing for traction, we're pushing for voices in the government and pushing for feminist policies. Because the politicians ultimately, they cater to the majority, and we believe that if the majority of women in Indonesia support local feminist movements that have liberal values, this means that they can lobby and this means that Indonesian political figures have to start getting involved and engaged with such liberally feminist ideas. And so to conclude, thank you.
In the developing world, the feminist movement is hampered by the fact that the movement is one that is foreign and it doesn't have a localized figure that individuals have attachments to. Individuals and localized figures that are already highly valued and represent femininity to the best extent possible. Indonesia is the one country that has that going for them. By God, I don't know why you would want to dump that only benefit and that only thing that can keep your movement going. So what is the delineation going to be in this debate? I think opening opposition spoke about palatability and the value of free choice. The way closing opposition is going to enter this debate is twofold. I'm just going to explain that process of palatability and why women are likely to reject feminism in the world of government. The second thing then is that there is an assumption that they made that Indonesia is very modern and X is happening. So maybe this is true, but even if it is not true, I think the unique explanation that we're going to give you in closing opposition is that how do we operate in these unsuccessful areas and how should we engage with the larger society? I have only two responses, everything else is integrated. First, to opening government. The first thing that suggested was now Kartini would be used to delegitimize feminism. Let them use it to delegitimize. We can whack them nicely. She came there and said you can be successful, you can become a doctor, and you can also be traditionally feminine at the same time. If they use, it's going to be one of the biggest mismatch ever. The fellow is like, oh, you should cook, but at the same time, you know that Kartini woman that became the literal fighter for independence? No, you cannot be like her, but by the way, I'm using her name. It doesn't make sense, and I don't think this argument is legitimate. The second thing then, about closing government. The first thing they suggested is they need Western intervention. But at the same time, later on, they want localized Indonesian locals to lead the feminist movement. Then what do you want? The harm of this, then there's a mismatch. Your feminists will consistently be shifting. 1 minute they're trying to represent Western values, suddenly they want to talk about being Indonesian and Asian. Suddenly one fella, the Asians aren't good enough, suddenly you must replace it with a Western figure. This mismatch means that people don't see the feminist movement as one with principles, and it doesn't have a backbone. That's why you are unlikely to get traction in the world of closing government. The second thing then is that they said they need Western intervention. No. Western intervention is the worst thing you can do here. Number one, they are so far ahead of us. The context is completely different. Their principles don't apply to a developing world where we have to take into account nuances that women still have to face in Indonesia that Western women don't. And secondly, what is Emma Watson going to do for Indonesia? She's going to come there, we must talk about the feminism, we must do all these things that are great. Okay, great, but if she has no understanding of the situation on the ground and she literally places women who live in these contexts out, that is a benefit harm, because localized feminists that you want to talk about lose their platform for people that are going to use you for advertisements and not to fund a factory. That's done. The first thing I want to do in this debate is not about whether we have choice versus femininity. That's like, there is no comparative in this debate. What this debate is about palatability. Given that we are operating in a patriarchal context, what is the best version and what's the best way possible to employ some version of choice and some version of freedom? With that being said, like, what does Hari Kartini look like? I can't believe this is a question I have to answer in CO. It's not that they tell women that you must be traditional and cook and sew only. It's no, you can cook, you can sew, and you can still be highly successful. So you can be a doctor without abandoning your feminine traditional roots. You can also be an engineer while still being a mother. You can also be a teacher, but still also maybe employ other things. This is how Hari Kartini works. So the first extension, how do we make the lives of women better? The first question I have to answer is traditionalism is strong and women are still going to opt into it even if you attempt to demonize it. Here are two structural reasons as to why. Number one, just the political nature of Indonesia, where the Islamist party is gaining more and more momentum in areas like Jakarta, areas that were traditionally very liberal that are now suddenly swinging towards one where these parties are like placing heavy emphasis on traditionalism and making women return to certain areas. The second is just the cultural norms and the way Indonesia was created was a society where women had to stay at home and take care of children while the men went to war with Malaysia over Gagasan 1963. All these sorts of things suggest that women will still opt into traditionalism, and here are two reasonable reasons why I gave it to you. Given that, how does Hari Kartini aid in changing this? Notice this is where I'm going to directly contest with opening government. Yes, I concede to an extent that this is patriarchal, but the value here is that you attach femininity and the traditional versions of it to a figure that is powerful and competent. So yes, you saw Kartini was traditional. Kartini wanted children. Kartini was very feminine, but she still led the independence movement. She still fought for independence and was highly successful in doing so, even so to the point where she was elected into the Senate that formed the Constitution. What does this mean? It means women who opt into this day can still be perceived as great. So what does this look like? It looks like you going for that cooking competition and just being recognized as an engineer. That yes, you're very feminine, but you're still highly successful because you replicate what Kartini did. This is a unique benefit that the government side will not have. The second thing then is that given that we are operating in a patriarchal system, we must utilize the mechanisms of it to our advantage. If the patriarchy wants us to have sewing competition, we will do it in a way where we can tell young women that you can sew and also be powerful. Because notice, the sewing competitions probably don't stop in the world of government, but at least in our world, there is an attachment of a powerful figure to it that people can have. And this is where I directly engage with both opening government and closing government. Yes?
Given that you want to become more palatable, but given that you also embolden the idea that women empowerment must surround femininity, how is it that you change anything under your circumstance because only one narrative exists?
So I don't understand why femininity and women empowerment have to be distinct. You can be an engineer and still want to have children. This choice is very legitimate, and that's what Kartini represents. The second thing that I want to talk about is that if you make it a choice to choose between traditionalism and feminism, women will reject it in your world because all these things are more valuable to them. These are things that they grew up with. These are things that are indistinct and separate from their identity that you cannot do so. Second and last argument, what did Kartini want? She did not want to abandon femininity. She wanted to be portrayed as both women can do both. She can be powerful and you can also have children. You can also lead the nation and still be good. But at the point in which that you abandon it, you violate that dream of hers because she was the leader of feminism. She was the person that started the movement. She was the person that gave you that momentum. In principle, you cannot abandon her because she is literally the only reason as to why your fight is still going on. In conclusion, the debate has been messy because everyone here is just making assumptions of the developing world. What is most important is giving people a palatable figure. That palatable figure is the independence hero known as Kartini.
Could you pass my phone now? Could you pass my phone, please? Excuse me. Side-closing opposition tries to redefine Kartini as somebody who is pushing for both. You know, you have the choice to be a wife, you have the choice to be an engineer. We will acknowledge, maybe this is what Kartini wants, but if we look at Kartini Day itself, the thing that is being controlled by the government because it is a national holiday, a government that is becoming more conservative as they characterize themselves, we tell you at the point at which the government has more control over this and time is urgent, that's when things are going to get worse. That's when Kartini Day, which is only celebrating or mostly celebrating cooking, dancing, sewing, and all these sorts of feminine qualities, and is not talking about being both as they try to reframe it. We tell you are not going to access any of the benefits that you're talking about. This is a complete waste of time, right? We don't understand how you can redefine a day that is being controlled by the government you find so evil, and one that is redefining what Kartini does. Rather, we would choose the alternatives, right? We're going to show you why we get local movements even if the Western movement fails. That's a unique extension that we brought to you that was different from our opening. Two main issues that we will have to dissect with many layers within. Firstly, what do women actually want in Indonesia and why is it important to introduce liberalism? And secondly, who can achieve actual feasibility? And why even if we can achieve feasibility, why is it so necessary to push for these sorts of ideas? So into the first idea, right? What do women actually want? The opening tries to tell us that women can choose to be wives if they want to. Yes, of course, women can choose to be wives if they want to. Women can always choose to cook if they want to. Regardless of whether Western liberalism comes in, there are still Western women who can still cook, who can still be wives, right? The choice is always going to be there on both sides. The question is, do they have the choice to become an engineer? Do they have the choice to become a politician? Or is there discrimination within the workplace that's going to fight against them? Are they in place rape culture? Are their parents going to indoctrinate them? Or is a unique extension we brought in, right? Are conservative families where they're constantly being told that you have to sit down, look at this cooking show, you have to enjoy it, this is what you have to be. How are you going to achieve any change in those particular areas? They offer no substantiation. We tell you that the people who are being oppressed, let's just say even 80% of all Indonesians want to be a wife, want to really be a cook, and they don't really care. Even the 20%, they are the most vulnerable ones because they are being oppressed out of their identity, out of what they want. So we would rather defend those 20% than all these people who are going to be happy no matter what happens on their side of the house, right? You literally also say that they are oppressed. So that's contradictory analysis. No, sit down. Well, I'll address you later. Secondly, right, we tell you that we're able to accelerate processes for both goals. At the point at which you are able to redefine the feminist movement and talk about important things like equal pay, things that are still third-wave feminism but are still very important to people, at the point at which you are able to redefine that, hey, femininity is not what you want, and we actually engage with them, that we have powerful celebrities from the feminist movement who are opening conversations, who are forcing politicians to dialogue about this, to make campaign promises, and when we have NGOs that are already pumping money into it because of the feminist institutions, we tell you at that point, that's when we're able to put into both goals. At the point at which you are putting more, generally speaking, more propaganda, more media, more discussions, that is at the point at which we can have both. And you take our worst case, right? Let's just say they completely reject Western feminism. And the thing is, how will they do this? They will be doing this within discussions. They will be doing this within newsrooms. They will be doing this with asking local feminists what they actually feel. And that's when the local feminists, as we described, the local grassroots movements can actually push the ideology they want. But now they have screen time. Now they have the support of Emma Watson. And even if they divide from those previous feminist movements, they can at least have the platform to actually speak out. Because people are going to engage with them. People are actually going to listen to them because they would rather choose this more liberal local feminist than say Emma Watson. And that's taking our worst case, right? We specifically said that this is our worst case. We don't really want this world, but at the point at which we have some progress from a slightly more conservative but local feminist who's still pushing for positive ideas, that's the type of goal that we want. And that's how we're able to achieve both goals, whereas you only get one.
Closing.
So let me get this straight. You concede that the government is conservative and they have control over all platforms, and yet they're still going to be somewhat more accepting of a literal Western feminist that is Emma Watson represents the antithesis of their policy. How does this make sense?
Look, and the thing is, sorry, this is technically my second clash, but let's just jump into this first, right? You tell us that conservatism is getting worse. That means that there's a nature of urgency. That means that the government is going to be able to control the feminist movements very soon. That means the government is going to be able to choose who gets to lobby and who does not get to lobby. That is the point at which they get to control the media, they get to control and define how the national holiday is going to be celebrated. Perhaps these are extreme, but they generally have more power and more media influence when they get on top. But this is the critical moment at which you can activate the masses, right? Because there are a lot of people who like Beyonce. There are a lot of people within Indonesia who are willing to support even flaky feminists. And at the point at which they are going to actually opt in and cross this barrier of entry, this idea, this very concept of feminism, that's when they can opt into more ideas. So the point at which we can strike them when they're weak, strike them before they are able to control the media, and put the right ideology first, with Western support, with NGO support, with celebrity support. We are willing to do that. We are perfectly willing to trade off Kartini's legacy, right? This last minute principle where they say we have to respect her. We do not have to respect the dead. We tell you what's more important is we respect the women who are being harmed right now. So let's just deal with that principle right away. We don't believe this is something that's important to this debate. Sit down. Thirdly, they also tell us that Western feminism is generally irrelevant in this place, but we tell you that even third-wave feminism does have practicality. Rape culture still exists. Work discrimination still exists. All these things are pressures that they refuse to take on. They refuse to explain any process of how you're going to change this under a conservative government. Even if the conservative government just wipes us out and refuses to listen to us, at the point at which we actually have some pockets of civil society that are enabled to believe in themselves, that actually have some hope to push, at least we have a chance. At least we are able to create some change. Whereas sitting down does absolutely nothing for their side, and they offer no real solution as to how they're going to fix this, except letting the conservatives choose whatever, own the idols and decide it. Sit down. Into the second clash. Who exactly is going to empower women? Why is it actually feasible? I've addressed this in some of the rebuttals and the POI that they forced out of me. But firstly, we tell you that we have more discussions, right? Media is going to shift to understand what is the feminism they want rather than about cooking shows, right? They're being forced to do it by all the Western celebrities. Even if they reject them, we tell you people will still care. People will still engage. People will still become aware of feminism. If feminism is declining, as OG is talking about already, then if we get them into the baseline feminism because the local grassroots movements are pushing for that, we still get their goal and we get it better than their side. Sit down. Secondly, right? We tell you that we also provided specific analysis into how icons from overseas are better. Because recognize, what are the icons that are happening within Indonesia? These are the best cooks. These are perhaps maybe in one or two cases engineers who are also happen to be white. But we tell you at the point at which you have a massive celebrity with critical mass with millions of dollars who everybody knows, everybody has heard about, everybody's going to use in their conversations. We tell you that even if these people are advertising them as they say Taylor Swift and Beyonce might do, we tell you at the point at which you are still getting feminists, that is still a superior type of icon than one who is being controlled or one who's only glorified because she can cook well. She's not being glorified because she's an engineer and can cook well. That's why the show is specifically on those types of competitions, right? We also tell you how politicians are going to change, how discourse is going to change, how the people are going to happen. And lastly, we tell you you have to prove feasibility. We tell you at the point at which we can show that there is going to be a movement that is existent, there is going to be a movement that is stronger, we would rather that world. We would rather a world in which, in recognizing the urgency of the matter, we are going to at least try some effort to fight back. And we need the most resources to get it. Because all movements are founded on resources, all movements are founded on the amount of public support, and we tell you that icons such as Taylor Swift, no matter how bad they are generally better than anything that they have offered to us.
Closing government tells us that they want policy changes, that they want to champion radical feminist values in Indonesia, but at the same time suggest virtually nothing to tell me why women in Indonesia are ready for this, why women in Indonesia will bandwagon behind this, and why they won't just opt for the most simplest and convenient other option, opting out of feminism or just listening to the patriarchy. This debate is about an arbitration of where women are most likely going to side. And this debate will be decided on who gives you the most suggestible reasons as to why someone will side with that version of feminism. And that's where closing opposition will take this debate. I have one response to closing government before I talk about two questions I have in my speech. Firstly, where is feminism received best to directly tackle the issue of electability? And second, what does the upshot of Kartini Day look like? So what is the long term and how does process change actually happen in closing opposition? Before that, the one response to Kartini, because note that they suggest that we're going to redefine Kartini under our work. But I think Navi did a fantastic job in suggesting why nothing we're doing is redefining Kartini. We are merely just suggesting that she was a traditionally feminine woman who was also an extremely successful person in fighting for a right to education in the political atmosphere. This suggests that one can balance both things, such as carry career while being a traditionally feminine person as well, without abandoning these ideals. This is not a redefinition. The redefinition happens in Gov when you strip away the femininity and say, no, Kartini wasn't a feminine person. She hated femininity. You should come and play drag racing during Kartini Day, and you will learn feminism through this specific process. That is the ripping away of Kartini's identity under their work. But also look, right, like in no time they suggest why their grassroots movement is going to work. Because if women are just going to see the Western ideals represented by their local figures, there's no commonality to bandwagon behind this particular narrative. The commonality is Kartini and Kartini's values. The more stories you can suggest that she was a feminine person, the more people to corroborate that yes, she was a feminine person is suggested in this certain legend, on this certain story, the more ability for you to believe that this was a real figure in the land that you are from, and that you're more likely to access the idea of being a successful woman while not having to make that sacrifice of your femininity. So closing government is out of this debate because the extension just has no virtual pathway to decide how they reach there. The two questions I'll ask in my speech. The first, where is feminism received best? Because I think this debate spent significantly a lot of time arbitrating which is the best kind of feminism, and the POI came from OG was very confusing because apparently we have to choose only one narrative because it must either be choice-based or it must be either like traditional femininity. Maybe this is true, but modern day feminism doesn't do this, bro. Like modern day feminism confuses the out of a lot of people, right? Like literally, you like modern day feminism tells you that you can be a housewife and you can be successful. At the same time, radical feminism tells you you cannot be a housewife. Being a housewife is bad. You must be a fully career woman. Like this is so confusing to an average person. It's going to be significantly more confusing for your average woman in Indonesia from a conservative setting or from any kind of Indonesian setting, because they're never going to be able to come to terms with the fact that I have to make that trade-off. Because oftentimes for a lot of women in Indonesia, femininity is something they have grown up with. They've been accustomed to. This means a great part to them, being a mother, being a caring and nurturing person in general, is something they hold so much value to. Asking them to choose either or, that you have to trade off femininity or you have to choose between wanting your rights, that is a sacrifice that a lot of women are not going to make because it's too much of a significant cost to you. The Kartini Day that exists under opposition's world is one that allows you to internalize the idea that these two identities can amalgamate and simultaneously exist at one, and there's an important narrative to tell women because they don't opt out of feminism. They don't feel like they have to make a false dichotomous choice, and it's a significant win under our world. But also note, we absolutely are able to, on a better level, bandwagon of the cult of personality that Kartini has, because Kartini is a person that was able to juggle these two identities, and she's also someone that is incredibly personalized to the Indonesian context. You won't get that under their walls. The next question I'll ask in my speech is, what does the upshot of Kartini Day look like? I think Navin did a good job about this already, but let me just extend this a little bit more in response to the speakers before me. Opening government and closing government have one similarity, that they suggest that airtime is more likely going to favor the their will, and airtime, rightfully conceded, is important for a lot of movements, but give no analysis to suggest why airtime is going to favor their version of Kartini Day. It is analogous to say that you want FIFA to exist, but instead of playing football, we'll play the violins in the field, and we'll expect Coca-Cola and football fanatics to sponsor the field. Bro, people don't care about the male or masculine versions of feminism or femininity under your work. The reason people fund a lot of money into these avenues, into Kartini Day, into celebrations, into singing contests on television, is because of the idea of femininity being held at a high pedestal in the Indonesian context. That is important because insofar as you don't have airtime, you can't highlight the success stories of your local women in Indonesia. You don't have the ability for your local women to say, hey, I am good at cooking, I can be successful at it at the same time, and go and win this singing contest, go and win this cooking contest, and be painted as incredibly successful people who are also able to be feminine at the same time. That is important because without that, you don't have the ability to highlight these success stories that resonate most with people in these communities. That is how you get change under closing opposition's work. When successful women are highlighted through the femininity that they can do, because women can't act like men and be more like men than men can. So abandon that fight, bro, and like embrace the femininity that works in your favor in this specific context, right? Like also I reasonably also believe that like these cooking contests and these cooking competitions are still likely also to happen under opening government's work. It just won't be called Kartini Day. So all of these things are likely still going to be able to receive support under your work. Yes.
Look, feminine traits are already celebrated in Indonesia because it's structured in patriarchy. At least we provide a counter narrative. You celebrate only feminine traits in, and how can diverse narrative exist then?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it is patriarchal. We consider like femininity is important to a lot of women in Indonesia. That's why you get women to opt in. You need to suggest why people are still going to opt into feminism. You haven't done, so we win on that clash, right? Like, very quickly to end this, I think the best way for you to like propel women and be upshot looks like for a lot of women being able to resonate with being matriarchal figures in their societies, perhaps, or at the very least be able to get this bargaining checks in the specific contests that they go to, or the singing competitions that they go to, or being able to be seen as respectable and successful women in society. Now we suggested very clearly that if you are able to be painted as traditionally feminine, traditionally successful, that's how you champion causes. That's how you're able to bring the feminist agenda to the table. That's how you get bargaining chip in discussions when you're talking to men. Closing government cannot just suggest that policy changes happens, must give us a roadmap. At the very least, some suggestible reasons as to why women are able to highlight or amplify those causes. They don't do such things. The debate is simple. It is where about we play to our strengths and where do we champion the ideals that women resonate with. We're happy to side with Kartini, who chose femininity and success without forcing a false choice.
Thank all teams for the debate.